Fire. Fire everywhere. Scorching heat tore at my throat, smoke flooding my lungs like molten lead being poured into my chest. I knelt on the bedroom floor, my hands bound behind my back with a belt. Flames leaped from the curtains to the ceiling, the wallpaper curling, blackening, and peeling in the intense heat. The moment the glass window shattered, cold air rushed in, fueling the blaze even fiercer. Help! My voice was swallowed by the crackling roar. No one would come. This was a suburban villa, with no neighbors within 500 meters. All the servants had been sent away tonight. The door was locked from the outside. I coughed violently, my tears evaporating instantly in the scorching heat. The carpet beneath my knees was already on fire, and a burning pain seared through my skin. I rolled and struggled, the belt cutting into my wrists, blood dripping down my fingers. In my final glance, I saw someone standing outside the door. The firelight illuminated half of his face. Dominic. My husband. He watched me burn to death with an expressionless face, like he was disposing of a piece of trash, no emotion, no reaction, not even a hint of pleasure. I wanted to scream, to ask why, but my throat was already scorched, and only a hoarse, garbled sound escaped. Dominic turned and walked away. The sound of his heels striking the marble floor echoed, one step, another, growing fainter and fainter. The fire had completely consumed me. My last thought before death wasn't hatred, it was injustice. I had been married to him for 3 years, fighting for his assets, battling his stepmother, shielding him from open attacks and hidden schemes. Half of his business empire was built by my own hands. Why? Darkness engulfed me. The last thing I perceived was someone laughing. A woman's laughter, sharp, triumphant, relieved. Bang! My eyes snapped open. A crystal chandelier. No fire, no thick smoke. It was the banquet hall of the Shin family's old mansion. I looked down at my hands, no burns, no blood. The skin was fair, the nails painted a nude pink. The noise around me was chaotic. Clinking glasses, rustling silk, high heels clicking against marble. Scarlet, what are you spacing out about? A hand landed on my shoulder. I turned around. Dominic. In a dark gray suit, with a gentle smile and a concerned look in his eyes. 26-year-old Dominic, before the later darkness, looked like the perfect fiancé. Fiancé. Not husband. I latched onto that key word. This year is 2019. It's the Shin Corporation annual gala. I am 23, having just returned from studying in the UK. Dominic has just proposed to me, our wedding is set for next autumn. The fire is 2 years and 3 months away. Memories of my past life flood in like a breached dam. December 18, 2021, a villa on the outskirts catches fire. Dominic locked the door himself. His stepmother, Vanessa, laughs from outside. They conspired to kill me. Why? Because I discovered their secret. Dominic and his stepmother, Vanessa, are having an affair, and Vanessa holds evidence of the true cause of the head of the Shin family's death. I was a pawn. Married into the Shin family to help Dominic stabilize the board, to take the bullets for him. Once the deed was done, the pawn was to be discarded. Not only discarded, but made to die cleanly. A fire, an accident, an insurance payout, clean. My fingers began to tremble. Not from fear. It was because rage was exploding through my veins, just like that fire back then. Scarlet? Are you feeling unwell? Dominic frowned slightly. I looked at his face. Gentle, considerate, fake. In my past life, I was fooled by this facade of his for 3 years. I'm fine. I stood up. Maybe I drank too much. I'm going to the restroom. Dominic's gaze lingered on my back for 2 seconds, I could feel it. In those 2 seconds, he was scrutinizing me. It was the first time he had looked at me with that kind of eyes. In my past life, I wouldn't have noticed. In this life, I see it all. The face in the bathroom mirror was young. 23, bright and sharp, with edges that hadn't yet been worn down. In my past life, Dominic had ground them down over 3 years, turning me into a docile, foolish woman. Not this time. I pulled my phone out of my bag and scrolled to a name in my contacts, Ethan. Heir to the Zhou group, Dominic's archrival. I had never met him in my past life. Dominic described him as a good-for-nothing playboy. But later, I saw an investigation report about him in Dominic's encrypted files. That man was no worse than Dominic, just waiting for the right moment. The right moment hadn't come then. Now it has. I dialed the number. Hello, who is this? A deep male voice, tinged with a hint of weariness. Ethan? I'm Scarlett. Dominic's fiancé. There was a 3-second silence on the other end of the line. Interesting, he said, the weariness gone from his voice. Dominic's fiancé, why are you calling me? Because I want to make a deal with you. The bid floor price for the South City plot. Another silence, this time longer. You're making this call at the Shin family's annual gala. Ethan's voice was like a knife's edge. Not afraid Dominic will find out? I looked at the bathroom door. Outside, clinking glasses and music drowned out everything. So what if he finds out? The game has only just begun. I hung up and pushed the door open. Dominic was clinking glasses with someone. When he saw me, he smiled and waved. Scarlett, come here. I walked over, linked my arm through his, and smiled sweetly. My nails dug into my palm. Dominic, you burned me to death in our past life. In this life, I'll show you what real fire means. 3 days later, at the tea house in the west of the city. Ethan was heavier than I'd expected. 28 years old, in a black overcoat, with highbrow bones and narrow eyes that seemed to weigh you up when he looked at you. No small talk, no pleasantries. I slid a USB drive across the table. This is the bid proposal Dominic prepared, 3 versions. The final one is marked with a red dot in the folder. Ethan didn't touch the USB drive. He stared at me. Why? Because he deserves to die. I don't believe in free lunches. Of course it's not free. I leaned back in my chair. I help you win this piece of land, and you help me with 3 things. First, keep my involvement confidential. Second, after it's done, help me acquire 8% of Shin's shares, buy them at market price, but you'll help me drive the price down. Third, investigate the relationship between Dominic and Vanessa, as well as the true cause of Samuel's death. Vanessa is his stepmother. I know. You want to use this to get him? Not just that, I said. Ethan was silent for a long time. The tea went cold, and he ordered another pot. Scarlett, you're not what I've heard about. What have you heard? Docile, obedient, Dominic's accessory. That was in a past life. As I said this, my heart skipped a beat. But Ethan didn't press further, he just glanced at me and picked up the USB drive. Deal done. 2 weeks later, the bidding for the South City plot took place. Dominic was determined to win. He had prepared for 3 months, mobilized all his connections, and even illegally diverted company funds for the deposit. In my past life, he won, and from then on, his rise was unstoppable. This time, at the bid opening, the host announced, Zhou Corporation. The entire room erupted in murmurs. Dominic's face turned pale in an instant. He whipped his head around to glare at the vice president. That look, I had seen it in my past life, when he fixed that same stare on an old executive who opposed him at a board meeting. 3 months later, that man was kicked out. What's going on? The base bid has been leaked. Zhou Corporation's proposal is 8% lower than ours, right below our cost line. Dominic clenched his fists, his knuckles cracking. But it took him only 5 seconds to compose his expression, turning to me and taking my hand. Scarlett, don't be afraid. I'm fine. His tone was gentle, but his grip was tight, as if testing something. I know you're fine, I said. You'll definitely find out who did this. He nodded, his gaze sweeping across my face. That look lingered half a second longer. He was watching me, not the way a fiancé watches his beloved, but the way one watches a suspect. My heart tightened. But I kept my composure. The night the bid failed, the Shin family erupted. Dominic's uncle, Stephen, slammed the table at the family meeting, 30 million in preliminary investment, all down the drain. Dominic sat at the far end of the long table, his face ashen. I noticed his hands clenching and unclenching beneath the table. He was calculating. Not the losses, but the people. After the meeting, I thought he would go find Vanessa to discuss a countermeasure. But he didn't. He followed me back to the bedroom. Scarlett. Have you been seeing anyone frequently lately? My heart suddenly raced. He was already investigating me. Not really. I've just been running between the office, home, and the wedding venue every day. I yawned. What's up? Nothing. He smiled and came over to hug me from behind. I just feel like you've changed a lot lately. Can't quite put my finger on it, but you're different. His chin rested on top of my head, his voice as gentle as a love confession. But I could feel his fingers tapping lightly on my waist, 2 taps, a pause, 2 more taps. He was thinking. Thinking about how to test me. Maybe it's just the wedding getting closer, making me nervous, I said. Yeah, he said, kissing my hair. Get some sleep. He was gone. The moment the door clicked shut, I heard him pause in the hallway, maybe 3 seconds, before he continued walking away. What was he hesitating about? I stood by the window, watching him recede into the distance. From today onward, Dominic wouldn't just be a passive punching bag. He would investigate, probe, and weave his web in the shadows. I had to be faster than in my past life. A week later, I met with Tina. The financial director of the Shin Group, in her 40s, sharp and efficient. She was promoted by Samuel, and Dominic had tried several times to replace her without success. In my past life, she was fired by Dominic at the end of 2020 on charges of financial irregularities, and 2 months later, she died by suicide. In the booth at the tea restaurant, Tina looked at me, her brows slightly furrowed. Miss Scarlett invites me to a place like this? Because in a formal setting, some things are hard to say. I cut straight to the point. Dominic is going to replace you before the end of this year. Tina paused mid-motion as she raised her teacup, but her expression remained unchanged. How do you know that? Because your position is too critical. The CFO knows all the company's secrets, and he doesn't trust you. Dominic has only one criterion for hiring people, whether they're his own. You're not, so you have to go. Tina was silent for a long time. She didn't ask why I helped her. Someone who's made it to this position doesn't ask such pointless questions. Instead, she asked another question, what do you want? 3 things. First, I want to be informed of every financial transaction involving Vanessa in the Shin Corporation. Second, when Dominic moves against you, let me know in advance. Third, one day in the future, I'll need you to step forward and testify. Testify about what? Samuel's death. Tina's hand suddenly clenched around her teacup. She didn't ask, wasn't Samuel's death from illness? She just stared at the tea in her cup for a long time. He was my benefactor, she finally spoke, her voice hoarse. When Samuel promoted me, the whole company opposed it because I was a woman. He pushed me up against all the pressure. I know. If there's really something suspicious about his death, Tina looked up, her eyes reddening. I'll help you. She didn't ask why, didn't ask on what grounds, didn't even ask how I would guarantee her safety. She simply said, I'll help you. People like her don't make promises lightly. But once they do, they never look back. As I walked out of the tea restaurant, I received a message from Ethan. Vanessa met with Caleb, the deputy general manager of the Shin Group, this afternoon. A private meeting lasting 2 hours. Caleb. Dominic's right-hand man. I'd dealt with him in my past life, ruthless, tight-lipped, and merciless. Can you find out what was discussed? No. But my people discovered that Caleb has been checking your call logs with Felix recently. Felix? The chief legal counsel of the Shin Group. I haven't had a chance to reach out to him yet. This means Dominic has started casting his net. He's not sure who the mole is, so he's putting everyone possible under suspicion, including me. Should we warn Felix? Ethan asked. No need. That would alert the enemy. One more thing. Ethan's next message made me stop in my tracks. My people planted a bug in Vanessa's villa. They recorded a conversation this afternoon. He sent me an audio file. I put on my earphones and clicked play. First came Vanessa's voice. Dominic, are you sure you want to do this? He's your uncle, after all. Dominic's voice. Uncle? When has Stephen ever treated me like a nephew? Pushing Isaac to the top, isn't that just a way to sideline me? So what are you planning to do? A car accident. Next month, Isaac has to go to the neighboring city for a project inspection, and there's a stretch of mountain road he must take. I've already arranged for someone. No one will die, but he'll be laid up for at least 3 months. Is 3 months enough? It's enough. As long as Isaac isn't at the company, Stephen has no reason to make me hand over power. By the time Isaac comes back, the situation will already be settled. The audio ended. My hands began to tremble. Not out of fear, but because it was too soon. In my past life, Dominic made his move against Isaac in 2020, after I married into the Shin family. This time, it's a full year earlier. It's because my presence disrupted the situation, forcing him to bare his fangs sooner. This is an opportunity. I dialed Ethan's number. Keep that audio clip safe. Also, arrange for someone to keep an eye on Isaac's schedule. He can't go on that inspection trip next month, but he can't know we're the ones stopping him. You want him to witness Dominic's car accident setup with his own eyes? Yeah. I'm going to bring Isaac over to my side. Isaac is Stephen's son. Stephen may fight with Dominic, but that doesn't mean he'll side with you. He will, I said. Once he finds out Dominic wants to kill his son. In mid-June, Isaac was on an inspection trip in a neighboring city. The day before he left, I sent him an anonymous message. Someone's tampered with the mountain road tomorrow. Isaac didn't believe it. He took a screenshot of the message and sent it to Stephen, who replied with a single word, boring. 2 hours before departure, the second message arrived. Left front wheel, 3 bolts are loose. This time, Isaac had the driver check. The bolts on the left front wheel were indeed loose. Not loosened naturally, the mechanic said it required tools. It was done deliberately by someone. At high speed, the wheel would fall off, the car would lose control and plunge off the cliff. Isaac's face turned pale. He cancelled the field trip and rushed back to the provincial capital overnight. At 2 in the morning, the doorbell of my apartment rang. Open the door. Isaac stood outside, his eyes red-rimmed, his suit rumpled. He didn't curse, didn't interrogate. His first words were, "You sent the message." Not a question, but a statement. Yes. How did you know? Because someone made sure I did. I stepped aside. Come in and talk. He walked in, didn't sit on the sofa, and stood in the middle of the living room, his whole body like a taut bowstring. Who wants to kill me? What do you think? Dominic. I said nothing. Isaac laughed, that kind of laugh that comes from being pushed to the absolute limit. Why? I have no grudge against him. Those 3 subsidiaries were all in the red, taking them over is basically cleaning up his mess, so why does he still want to kill me? Because your surname is Shen, I said. Because Samuel wanted to give you the inheritance. I pulled an envelope from my bag and handed it to him. This is a handwritten letter Samuel wrote before he died, addressed to an old subordinate. He never got the chance to send it. The letter mentions the change of heir, and also that he discovered the relationship between Dominic and Vanessa. Isaac tore open the envelope. The letter was short, only 1 page. I saw his fingers tighten abruptly as he read the last sentence. So Uncle was. His voice was muffled behind his hands. Killed by Dominic and Vanessa. Because they found out Samuel knew about their relationship and was going to change the heir. Isaac lowered his hands. His eyes were red, but there were no tears. Why are you doing all this? Because Dominic owes me his life. He looked at me, as if weighing the truth of those words. Then he nodded, not out of belief, but because he decided not to press further. What do you need me to do? On the day of the wedding, stand by my side. In front of everyone, publicly support me in exposing the truth. Where's my father? Which side is he on? Your father thinks he's fighting for power with Dominic. But he doesn't know Samuel was murdered. If he knew the truth, he wouldn't side with Dominic. But you need to think clearly. Once the truth comes to light, the Shin group will go through a massive earthquake. Isaac was silent for a long time. My uncle was good to me, he finally spoke. When I was a kid, my father was always busy. On weekends, my uncle would take me fishing. He wasn't a man of many words, but every time he'd buy me an extra ice cream because my mother died young. He paused. When he died, I was abroad. I didn't even get to see him one last time. Everyone told me he died of illness, and I believed them. I thought he left without suffering. He looked up at me. If everything you're saying is true, then I owe him justice. All right, I said. I'll be waiting for you on the wedding day. In early July, Ethan got in touch with Zane. It was still snowing in Toronto in April. Ethan and I sat in a private room at a Chinese restaurant, across from Zane. He was in his 60s, his hair completely white, his eyes sunken. His 3 years in Canada hadn't been kind, money came and went quickly, his wife ran off with someone else, and he lived alone in a small suburban apartment, scraping by on odd jobs. Miss Scarlett, Zane's voice was faint. Can you really guarantee my safety? I guarantee it. But it's not free. I want you to tell me how Samuel really died. Zane closed his eyes. It was the medication I prescribed. Vanessa said Samuel had severe insomnia and asked me to increase the sedative dosage. Later, she said his blood pressure wasn't well controlled, so she told me to double his antihypertensives. I mentioned the risks once, but she said she'd keep an eye on it and that I wouldn't be held responsible if something went wrong. Didn't you know it could kill someone? Ethan asked coldly. I know. But Vanessa gave me $500,000 in cash. And she said there'd be more once Dominic takes power. So you killed someone, I said. I didn't mean to kill anyone. I just thought, increasing the dosage a bit wouldn't cause trouble so quickly. Samuel died 3 months later. Zane's shoulders slumped. I regret it every single day. Regret is useless, I said. I need you to return to the country and testify. They'll kill me. Won't they kill you if you stay in Canada? I pulled a photo from my bag and slid it across. In the photo, a man stood outside Zane's apartment building, making a phone call. This person had followed us the entire way, from the airport to the hotel to the restaurant. Ethan confirmed it was someone Vanessa had hired. A private detective Vanessa hired. He arrived in Toronto 2 weeks ago. You thought she'd forgotten about you? She's waiting. Waiting for you to let your guard down completely, waiting for you to feel safe, and then. Zane's face was as white as a sheet. What should I do? Go back home. Testify. Then get a new identity and start over. Can you really do it? I can't, I said. But he can. I glanced at Ethan. Ethan nodded expressionlessly. Zane was silent for a full 5 minutes. Do you want to know about the will? My heart skipped a beat. A week before Samuel died, he wrote a formal will, by hand, in duplicate. One copy was locked in the study safe, and the other was entrusted to me. The will stated that the heir was not Dominic, but Isaac. Because he had discovered the relationship between Dominic and Vanessa. And then? On the third day after the will was written, Dominic and Vanessa found out. On the fifth day, Vanessa told me to increase the dosage. On the seventh day, Samuel had a cerebral hemorrhage and died in the study. The private room was so quiet you could hear the snow hitting the window. What about the other copy of the will? Ethan asked. The one I had was stolen. The night after Samuel died, my clinic was broken into, the safe was opened, and the copy of the will I was keeping was gone. Vanessa took it. Probably. But she only got my copy. What about the one in the study's safe? Samuel died suddenly. Dominic and Vanessa didn't dare to search the study openly. The study was sealed off by the police for 3 months, so they couldn't get in. By the time it was unsealed, Isaac had already been inside. A thought flashed through my mind. That suicide note might still be in Isaac's hands. He went into the study, but he didn't know Samuel had written a formal will. He might have thought those documents were unimportant and just stuffed them somewhere. Ethan looked at me. What are you going to do? Go find Isaac and confirm it. I turned to Zane. I need you to prove that the formal will is in Samuel's handwriting. Zane nodded. I can prove it. I'd been with him for 20 years. I could recognize his handwriting with my eyes closed. All right. I'll be back the day after tomorrow. Stay at the place Ethan arranged for now, and don't contact anyone. Zane stood up and bowed to me. Miss Scarlett, I have wronged Samuel. I made a mistake, and I am willing to face the consequences. After returning home, I immediately contacted Isaac. The documents you took from Samuel's study safe, are they still there? Isaac paused for a moment. Some of them are. Why? Find them all. I want to see them. 3 days later, Isaac brought over a cardboard box. I flipped through it page by page. Page 7. A yellowed piece of paper, deeply creased. On it was Samuel's handwriting. I, Samuel, hereby make this will. My fingers began to tremble. This was it. The will concluded, the relationship between Dominic and Vanessa is against moral principles, rendering them unfit to lead the Shin family. Therefore, I bequeath the inheritance rights to Isaac, hoping he will treat the Shin family well and not betray my trust. Date of signing, 7 days before Samuel's death. What's wrong? Isaac asked, noticing my expression. This is Samuel's official will, I said, looking up at him. You don't know what this is? Isaac took the paper, read it over carefully twice, and his expression changed. I thought it was just an ordinary notebook. Uncle loved to write things down when he was alive, his study was full of his manuscripts. Now you know. I carefully put the will away. On the day of the wedding, I need you to stand in front of everyone, holding this will. Isaac was silent for a moment, then nodded. At the end of July, it was Dominic's birthday banquet. The venue was the Old Shin family estate, with over 200 guests in attendance. Dominic wore a black suit, exuding confidence. I wore a red gown, holding his arm with a poised smile. Vanessa, in a champagne-colored dress, stood on Dominic's other side, greeting guests like the lady of the house. The three of them stood together like a family. Only I knew that beneath the warmth of this family lay nothing but knives. Halfway through the banquet, Dominic took the stage to speak. Thank you all. This year has been very important to me, and I have 2 announcements to make. The entire room fell silent. First, Scarlett and I have set our wedding date for October 15th of this year. Applause erupted. I stood up, smiling and nodding. Second, I have decided to transfer the management rights of 3 subsidiaries under the Shin Group to my brother, Isaac. Starting next month, Isaac will serve as the CEO of these 3 companies. The applause grew louder. Isaac sat in the audience, displaying a perfectly timed look of surprise before standing up and giving a slight bow. I understood Dominic's intention behind this move. Offloading 3 loss-making subsidiaries onto Isaac would both silence Stephen and burden Isaac with a heavy load. If Isaac failed to perform, it would only prove that he was unfit to take over. But Isaac also knew. He agreed to take it not because he was foolish, but because he had promised to stand by my side. After the banquet ended, Dominic had too much to drink and was helped back to his room. I stood alone in the garden, letting the night breeze wash over me. Scarlett. I turned around. Isaac stood in the shadows. What's wrong? My dad asked me to ask you something. Isaac lowered his voice. On the wedding day, what exactly are you planning to do? Make the suicide note and evidence public. Let the police take Dominic and Vanessa away. My dad said this would bring down the Shin family. No, I said. Felix has already organized all the evidence, targeting only Dominic and Vanessa's personal criminal acts, without involving the company as an entity. The police will only arrest them, not seize the company. Isaac was silent for a moment. My dad said he doesn't want to get involved. He doesn't need to be involved. He just needs not to stand in the way. Isaac nodded and turned to leave. In mid-August, Dominic made his move. Not against me, but against Tina. During a high-level meeting, he openly criticized the quality of the finance department's reports, saying some people are taking up positions without doing any work. He didn't name names, but everyone knew he was referring to Tina. Tina listened with a blank expression. After the meeting, she sent me a message, "He's made his move." I replied, "Is everything ready?" "It's ready." The thing she referred to was evidence of Dominic's unauthorized fund allocation. The South City land project had used the company's reserve funds without board approval. According to the company's bylaws, this was enough to have Dominic suspended. But Tina didn't bring it out now. She was waiting. Waiting for Dominic to officially make his move, so she could use this evidence to tell him, "If you dare touch me, I'll make sure you die first." Meanwhile, Vanessa was also making her move. Ethan intercepted the report from her private investigator. The report detailed my movements over the past 3 months, meetings with Ethan, with Tina, with Felix. Though there were no recordings or solid evidence, it was enough for Vanessa to confirm one thing: I was connecting the dots. "What does she plan to do?" I asked. "She's gathering evidence, planning to make Dominic call off the engagement before the wedding." "Call off the engagement?" "Yes. She spoke with Stephen, saying you're not fit to be the Shin family's daughter-in-law. Stephen agreed. He doesn't know you're helping Isaac, but he thinks you're too smart and hard to control." 2 votes. Stephen and Vanessa, both wanting the engagement called off. What about Dominic? The next day, the answer came. Dominic called me into the study and closed the door. "Scarlett, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Are you seeing Ethan?" My heart tightened. "How much did he know?" "Twice," I said, my tone calm. "The first time was to gauge his thoughts on the South Side plot. The second time, he reached out to me. I didn't refuse because I wanted to know what he was really up to." Dominic stared at me for a long time. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because there's nothing to tell. We met twice, had 2 meals, and nothing came of it. Telling you would only make you overthink." Dominic stood up, walked over to me, and reached out to lift my chin. "Scarlett, listen to me. Ethan is my biggest rival. If you associate with him, no matter your intentions, outsiders will misunderstand. I don't want misunderstandings, I want things to be crystal clear." "Then what do you want me to do?" "Don't see him again." "Okay." And also, his hand slid from my chin to my shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Hand your phone over to me for safekeeping." I looked up at him. "You're checking up on me?" "I'm protecting you." He smiled, but the smile was like ice. "You're my fiancé, and your safety is my responsibility." If there's anything in your phone that shouldn't be there, and someone else sees it, it won't be good for you. Let me filter it out first. He was confiscating my communication devices. Without my phone, I couldn't contact Ethan, Tina, or Felix. Fine, I said. I'll give it to you tomorrow. Not tomorrow. He took a small box from his pocket and opened it. It was a new phone, a senior model, only capable of calls and texts. Use this for now. It makes it easier for me to reach you anytime. He had thought it through too thoroughly. Too thoroughly to be a spur-of-the-moment decision. He had been ready for a long time, just waiting for today's excuse. I took the elderly phone and smiled. You're really thoughtful. Of course. He lowered his head and kissed my forehead. You're the most important person to me. I walked out of the study, returned to the bedroom, and closed the door. There was no SIM card in that elderly phone. He had taken the SIM card away too. This means he not only has to monitor my communications, but also cut off all my contact with the outside world. I walked over to the window and took out another phone from the hidden compartment in the drawer, a backup phone. I never use electronic devices to transmit critical information, but I also don't put all my eggs in one basket. I sent a message to Ethan. Dominic confiscated my phone. From now on, use the backup phone to contact me. Only turn it on 3 times a day. How's Felix's progress? The reply came quickly. 80% of the materials have been collected. Still missing 2 key documents. He said he can finish by mid-September. Mid-September. 3 weeks left. What about Vanessa? She met with Caleb today. They talked about you. She suspects you're colluding with Isaac, but she has no proof. She plans to do something before your wedding, force you to slip up. What kind of thing? I don't know. But she said one thing to Caleb: a woman's weakness is always what she cares about most. Whatever she cares about most, that's what we'll target. I held my phone and thought for a long time. What do I care about most? In my past life, I cared about Dominic the most. So much so that I lost myself. In this life, what I care about has changed. I care about freedom, about justice, about the fact that someone must pay for that fire. But none of these are things Vanessa can touch. Unless, she thinks what I still care about is Dominic. A thought flashed through my mind. She's waiting for me to make a mistake. Waiting for me to do something irrational because I care about Dominic. Then she'll use that as leverage to make Dominic call off the engagement before the wedding. This means she might be doing one thing, creating a crisis for Dominic, one that requires me to step in and save him. If I go to the rescue, I'll expose the truth I've been piecing together. If I don't, it proves I don't love Dominic, and the engagement can be called off. No matter what I do, she wins. No. I turned off my phone and stood in the darkness. Vanessa, do you think I'm still the foolish woman from my past life? You're wrong. In mid-September, Felix finished organizing all the materials. He arranged to meet me at his law firm, closed the door, and pulled down the blinds. The criminal complaint, the civil claim, and the witness protection application, all are ready. He pushed a thick folder toward me. Zane's testimony has been notarized, and the handwriting analysis is complete. I've photographed and archived Samuel's original suicide note, and the original is locked in a bank safe. What about the police? The Economic Crime Investigation Division of the Provincial Public Security Department has already filed the case. I've communicated with them, and on the wedding day, they'll send people to the scene. After you present the evidence in front of the guests, they'll make their move, so everyone will know what Dominic and Vanessa have done, and they won't have time for damage control. I opened the folder and flipped through it page by page. There's a problem here. I pointed to one page. The evidence of Dominic's unauthorized fund transfers doesn't match the timeline. The bidding for the South City plot was in February, but the transfer date for this fund is January. However, Dominic only officially took over the South City project in January, the transfer date is earlier than his takeover. That doesn't make sense. Felix took it, glanced at it, and frowned. You're right. That was a clerical error by my assistant. I'll fix it and adjust the date to February. And here. I flipped to another page. Zane's testimony says Vanessa gave him $500,000 in cash, but there's no withdrawal record of $500,000 in Vanessa's bank statements from that year. If she gave cash, where did the money come from? Felix was silent for a moment. I can't answer that question. Not unless we can trace the source of Vanessa's cash. If we can't trace it, cut it out, I said. Just say Vanessa gave Zane a sum of money, without specifying the amount. The fewer details, the harder it is to refute. Felix glanced at me. You're more cautious than I thought. Someone who's died once can't afford not to be. Felix didn't press further. He nodded and put the folder away. I'll give you the final version in 3 days. Okay. Stepping out of Felix's office, the night breeze was cool. I stood by the roadside, taking a deep breath. Ethan's car was parked across the street, its hazard lights flashing. I walked over, pulled open the door, and got in. Did it go through? It went through. The final version will be out in 3 days. Ethan started the car without saying a word. Aren't you going to ask why I was in such a hurry? You have your reasons for being anxious, he said. I don't need to know. After a moment of silence, he added, but if you want to talk, I'm listening. I looked out the window as the city's nightscape streamed past the car. Dominic checked my phone. I was careful and deleted everything important. In my contacts, I didn't save your name as Ethan, I saved it as Flower Shop. Ethan's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. He went through my chat logs, call records, photos. Found nothing. But he won't stop just because he didn't find anything, he'll find another way. Do you need me to send someone to protect you? No. He's not crazy enough to lay a hand on me. Are you sure? I thought for a moment. Not sure. But he's a smart man. He won't touch me before the wedding, because I'm the key to stabilizing the board. He needs me, this descendant of the Shin family's old loyalists, by his side. At least, until he secures absolute power. Ethan was silent for a moment, then said something that caught me off guard. You've changed a lot. For better or for worse? Got stronger. I turned to look at him. His profile flickered in and out of the streetlight's shadows, his expression unreadable. Thank you. October 15th. The Shin family's old mansion. I put on a white wedding dress, applied delicate makeup, and stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. In my past life, when I wore a wedding dress, my heart was filled with happiness. Now, as I wear it, my heart is filled with knives. Miss Scarlett, it's time to go out, the bridesmaid urged me. I stand up and take a deep breath. Today, either Dominic goes to hell, or I take him down with me. No. I won't go down with him. I will win. In the banquet hall, 300 guests. Crystal chandeliers, flowers, the orchestra playing the wedding march. I hold Dominic's arm, step by step down the red carpet. His smile is perfect, his gaze tender. Fake. All of it is fake. The officiant asks, Scarlett, do you take Dominic to be your husband? The whole room falls silent. I lift my head and look into Dominic's eyes. I do, I said, my voice calm. But I let go of his hand. Turning around, I faced all the guests. But before I say I do, there's something I need all of you here to know. Dominic's smile froze. Scarlett, what are you talking about? I ignored him. From the hidden pocket of my wedding dress, I pulled out a USB drive, something Dominic would never think to search for, because he wouldn't imagine I'd dare to hide it in my gown. Please play it. The large screen lit up. The first page displayed Samuel's suicide note. The entire venue erupted in uproar. In this suicide note, Mr. Samuel clearly states that the inheritance rights of the Shin group are not to be passed to Dominic, but to Isaac. Dominic's face turned pale. Scarlett, what nonsense are you talking about? He reached out to grab the USB drive. Ethan stood up from the guest seats and blocked his way. Felix also stood up. There are also colleagues from the Provincial Public Security Department's Economic Crime Investigation Unit here today. Please cooperate, Mr. Dominic. Dominic froze. His gaze swept from Felix to Ethan, then finally to me. In that moment, he finally pieced all the fragments together. The failure of the South City land parcel, Tina's unusual behavior, Isaac's sudden change of direction, Felix's silence, all of it pointed to one person. It's you, he said, not loudly, but each word seemed squeezed through his teeth. It's been you from the very start, from the South City land parcel, sabotaging me. Not sabotaging you, I said. Exposing you. Expose what about me? Expose that you killed Samuel. Dominic's face twisted for a moment, but quickly regained its composure. That calm was more terrifying than anger. He had completed the shift from shock to calculation in a single second. Do you have evidence? He asked, his voice surprisingly steady. Felix raised the folder in his hand. Dominic is suspected of intentional homicide, business violations, and embezzlement of company funds. All the evidence is here. Zane has already given a full statement to the police. Dominic turned to look at the door. Two people in uniform stood there. He didn't run, there was no escape. He didn't plead innocence, it was useless. He just looked at me. Why? What do you think? I asked you why. His voice suddenly rose, as if something had exploded inside him. Wasn't I good enough to you? Didn't I give you everything you wanted? Why did you do this to me? December 18, 2021, suburban villa, a fire. I said these words softly, so only he could hear. Dominic's pupils suddenly contracted. You, how do you know? Because you burned me to death in that fire. He didn't understand. His expression went blank in that instant. You're insane, he said. You're insane. Maybe, I said. Officer, please take them away. As Dominic was handcuffed, he still struggled. I didn't kill anyone. I didn't kill Samuel. Zane prescribed those pills himself. Vanessa was handcuffed too. She didn't say a word the entire time, just stared at me intently. Scarlett, she suddenly spoke before being taken away, her voice low but every word dripping with venom, you think you've won? I looked at her. You think that with Dominic gone, the Shin Corporation is yours? You think those old loyalists will bow to you? You think Stephen would let an outsider meddle in the Shin family's affairs? She laughed. The laugh was exactly the same as from outside the fire, shrill, triumphant, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. You've schemed so hard, and in the end, you'll get nothing. Because although you bear the surname Shin, you are not one of the Shin family. You will always be an outsider. You've taken your revenge, and now what? You're alone, with nothing. She leaned in a step closer, her eyes blazing with an unsettling intensity. You know, in the 23 years I've been married into the Shin family, the happiest day wasn't our wedding day. It was the day your father-in-law breathed his last. The entire room fell into dead silence. When he was alive, he looked down on me, thinking I was just a woman after his money. After he died, I spent his money, lived in his house, slept with his son. If he knew, he'd probably crawl right out of his coffin, wouldn't he? She looked at me, laughing. The pathetic one is you, Scarlett. You've thrown your whole life away for a dead man. You think you're serving justice? You're just being a pawn for a corpse. Samuel won't thank you, Isaac won't thank you, no one will thank you. In the end, you'll be nothing. Are you done? I asked. I'm done. She smiled even more brightly. Take me away. She was still smiling as she was taken away. I stood there, watching her retreating figure. She was right. No one would thank me. Samuel wouldn't sit up from his coffin to applaud me. Isaac wouldn't give me half the company. Tina and Felix wouldn't be grateful to me just because I was righteous. But if I had to do it all over again, I would still do the same. Not for gratitude. For justice. The banquet hall was in chaos. Stephen stood up and pointed at me. Scarlett. Look what you've done. How low will the Shin family's stock price fall tomorrow? I know. But a family held together by murder and adultery is bound to fall sooner or later. Stephen was so furious he couldn't speak. Isaac stood up. Everyone expected him to condemn me. But he walked up to me and bowed deeply. Thank you. For seeking justice for my uncle. Stephen was stunned. Isaac turned to face everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, everything Scarlett said is true. I have seen Samuel's suicide note. Samuel wanted to leave his inheritance to me, but Dominic and Vanessa used murder to stop that from happening. Today, Scarlett has brought justice for Samuel. On behalf of the Shin family, I thank her. Stephen slumped into his chair. There was no applause. No cheers. Only silence. 300 people, 300 pairs of eyes, all fixed on me. I knew what they were thinking. This woman is terrifying. She personally sent her own fiancé to prison on their wedding day. What kind of person is she? I am someone who was burned to death by them once. But I won't say it. No one would believe me. The guests had dispersed. I stood in the empty banquet hall, my wedding dress trailing on the floor, stained with dust. Ethan walked over and handed me a glass of water. Was it worth it? It was worth it. Do you hate him? I thought for a long time. I did. But now, I'm not so sure. Why? Because he's no longer worth it. Hating someone takes a lot of energy. He's not worth me spending that much energy on. Ethan looked at me. What will you do from now on? Be myself. 3 months later, Dominic and Vanessa's case went to trial. Dominic was sentenced to life imprisonment. Vanessa was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Zane, due to turning himself in and performing major meritorious service, was sentenced to 5 years. Felix resigned from his position as legal counsel for the Shin Group and opened his own law firm. Tina took over all of Dominic's responsibilities at the company, becoming the first female vice president in the history of the Shin Group. Isaac took over the Shin Group. He insisted on giving me 8% of the shares, and I didn't refuse. It wasn't for the money, it was to let Stephen know, Scarlett is not an outsider. I started my own company. Brand Consulting. In my past life, I worked for Dominic at Shin's for 3 years in marketing, gaining both experience and connections. The company was located in the west of the city, not big. On opening day, Ethan sent a flower basket. The card read, "Be yourself." A year later, the company moved to the city center. 40 employees, annual revenue exceeding 20 million. I bought my own house, my own car. Every day, I work out, read, meet clients. Life is fulfilling. Occasionally, I think of that fire. But I'm no longer afraid. Dominic sent me a letter from prison. The envelope read, "For Scarlett's eyes only." I didn't open it. I burned it. Just like he burned me back then. But the difference is, I burned a letter. He burned a person. I am not him. I will never become him. A year and a half later, I went to visit someone in prison. Not Dominic. Vanessa. She had lost a lot of weight, her hair half gray, wearing a prison uniform, her eyes clouded. But the corners of her mouth were still lifted, that smile, like a scar carved into her face. Come to laugh at me? No. What are you here for? To ask you a question. Do you regret it? Vanessa was silent for a long time. Then she smiled. Regret? My biggest regret is not killing you sooner. She leaned in a step closer, staring straight at me through the glass. You think you've won? Listen to me, Scarlett. Dominic hates you from inside the prison, Stephen hates you from the outside, and those old loyalists of the Shin family hate you too. You have no friends, no family. You live all alone. What makes you any different from me? There's a difference, I said. I live because I want to live. You live because you're afraid to die. Her smile froze for a moment. Vanessa, in this life of yours, besides hatred and greed, what else is there? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. You've never loved anyone. You've never been loved. You live just for the sake of living. I stood up. I won't become you. I turned and walked away. Behind me, Vanessa suddenly called out, Scarlett. I stopped. You really don't hate? I thought for a moment. I did hate. But hate is a cage. I don't want to lock myself inside one. I got out. You can stay locked up if you want. I walked away. As I stepped through the prison gates, the sunlight was beautiful. Ethan leaned against the car door, waiting for me. All done? All done. How does it feel? Relieved, I said. Like a weight lifted off my shoulders. He opened the car door. Come on, I'll treat you to dinner tonight. Okay. I got into the car. The engine started, and we drove onto the highway. Outside the window, the city's skyline glistened in the sunset. Ethan. Why are you helping me? He was silent for a few seconds. Because you deserve it. You deserve to live. You deserve happiness. You deserve to be treated well. I looked at his profile. The sunset light fell on his face, softening his features. Thank you. You're welcome. He smiled. I mean it. I didn't reply. But I said to myself, maybe someday. When I've truly let go. When I know who I am. When that day comes. Outside the window, the city's lights flickered on one by one. Like a river of stars. Like a rebirth.